So the next speaker is Professor Madhav Marathe. So Madhav.
Yeah, I'm online. I need to figure out how to get the slides up, so need somebody to help me.
You also, yeah.
So, okay, Niloy, I'm okay. I'm okay to start without the slides in.
So it's a pleasure to become Professor Madhav Marathe. So Professor Madhav Marathe is a professor in University of Vadodara, and unlike the previous two, he's a computer scientist, but he has been working on epidemiology for long, and along with high performance computing, and recently his group's work on COVID modeling in USA has been widely appreciated. So over to you, Madhav.
Thanks, Niloy, and thanks, Mega and Wolfgang and others. Slide will come up in probably in a minute after it gets there. But it's a pleasure to speak at this thing. Hopefully, we'll sort out the technical difficulties very soon. I also have with me Parantapa Bhattacharya, who is actually a student of Niloy and joined us as a postdoc. So it's a very nice connection that we have with Niloy's group. And Parantapa has been playing an important role in the work we're doing. So in today's talk, first of all, I want to acknowledge that this work is just not my work alone. It's the work of a very large team of close to 70 researchers at UVA, as well as at other participating institutions, Spring, Albany, Baden College Park, Google, and others. So I want to acknowledge them. In the slides, you will see a few references that one of the slides you can take a look. But let me move on to why we like to model in the first place. I think there was a very nice and healthy discussion early on with Gautam and Fernando asking him a few questions. So I have a particular view, and I think this is led by our group, on why we need to do modeling. And I think that the modeling that we do should be done with the goal of integrated reasoning about situations and actions. And in this sense, models have to go beyond simply the use of prediction in real time. That's absolutely important use. I will discuss work we do in it. But use of models goes beyond that. They are used to size available data to produce a consistent, meaningful representation. They are also used to provide a range of interpretations of incoming measurements. We can use the models to evaluate a range of responses, and Gautam mentioned this. I heard part of his talk. Monitor the effect of interventions, coordinate, understand among diverse stakeholders. And finally, we would like the models to be usable by analysts, not just computing experts or epidemic scientists. And Fernando had this question about it. I've seen many a times that this becomes an important issue to work with. Mega, the slides are on your way, so when you get it, you can put it up. So that's the reason we do modeling. So let me start with four challenges that I think that the data scientists and AI efforts have as we start to develop models to support epidemic science and the kind of supports I talked about. And I'm going to talk about four challenges here. The first is a data challenge. This is surprising. We already heard in Gautam's talk to an extent. Diversity of data sets, the data sets being noisy and sparse, timeline, anonymity and privacy is an important constraint. So methods that we develop need to accommodate for this particular challenge. The challenge of scale. Again, we can talk about micro scale. You might want to, at some level, understand the immune system if you study viruses and their immune response within the body. All the way to social scales and across countries if that's needed and important. Right now with Vex, that has become an important question to study. The third challenge is one of trust adequacy. This was again discussed quite a bit in the previous aspect. I want to take it a little bit further. I want to point out that no trust adequacy of these models doesn't just come from retrospective of predictive validity. Those are absolutely fair things to try and do, and one should always do it. But that view, and that's the only view of using these models and understanding validity, would in my opinion, would not be the best way to understand. There is still validation one needs to perform, whether the models have the right data sets and they're put together correct. We want to understand the basic issues that revolve around the uncertainty parameters, heliotropic uncertainty and epistemic one. So want to understand what is uncertainty to the model itself, and one is uncertainty to the data availability and understanding of the world. And the final challenge is one of decision making. This is discussed usually as much in the literature, but this challenge in my opinion is real. Robust human-centered decision making in information environment is a non-trivial issue, and here decision making is to be understood not just by being made as policymakers at the topmost level, but all of us individually are decision makers and actually are affecting the pandemic, whether we use our masks or not, whether we vaccinate ourselves or not, whether we send kids to school or not. These are actually part of micro decisions, and these decisions affect them. So there was a discussion again in the previous talk about aggregate versus network epidemiology, and I have a figure here, but since some probably covered this quite well, we've already heard through Fernando's and his compartment mass action models. They've been very successful, very useful, very easy to build, very clean in many ways, and have had tremendous impact in epidemic science all the way from early 1900s when Ross written and McHenry worked on. And you can use it to understand basic epidemiological parameters quite well. But there are some basic challenges one faces when studying this model. I think hopefully mega slides will come up very soon, and they are good. So it's slide 12. Slide 12.
Okay.
It's good timing. Thank you. The initial part was easily done using Word, so this would work very well. Thank you so much, Megha.
So if you say next,
yeah, but it's not showing up on my screen right now as slide 12. Is it already up?
Not in my screen.
Can you see it now?
No.
We cannot see it.
I try to share the screen.
Yeah, I think for slide it might be you to have this picture because
now it is. Yes, screen is coming.
I'm also trying to upload this in Teams. That would make it better.
So let's start describing it. What I have in this picture is a network. It's a graph that is close to a complete graph. And I ask the following question.
Did you see
how
the
can
slide?
I do? Not yet, Megha.
Not yet. Okay, I try to do it. I try to upload it in Teams and then it will be visible.
Right. So the question I'm trying to gain here is the subtlety that arises where mass action models have trouble probably deciphering what's going on. So the question was, if I view a network and if I say, I want to reduce the infections below a certain threshold. In a net model, the way you do is you basically change the value of beta and you pull the numbers down. You can change incubation period, but let's say that was not something that you want to change. So with that, but in reality, look at how this particular statement be interpreted, right? In work model, you could either reduce the intensity of content on each of the edges. You can split the network into two parts. You can remove some of the edges, such as social distance, each of which would actually achieve the same goal of reduce R0 and producing the outcome that we would see. So the point I try to make is one which is well known in physics, which is to try and understand how operationalize the physical social interventions onto a model. All of them are actually in this particular setting, but they are fundamentally very different social interventions. And network models, in my opinion, allow you to capture this representation. So anyways, I view agent-based network models as ones which, for all their complications, one of the best things they do is try and be able to present interventions parsimoniously. The approximations that are in compartment models often take away these things, and many different interventions as a result essentially look very similar but have very different social impact. So in my talk, what I've done, I've tried to explain network model, and I hope as Megha brings the slides up, we can come to it. Building these networks becomes a non-trivial aspect, and this is something our group has spent now good 20-25 years. In fact, Gautam mentioned the work they're doing at SIM. Student Harshal, who was with me at Virginia Tech, has learned a lot of the work there, and he's, as I understand, using much of the training he had at Virginia Tech to build Bharat SIM. But I could be wrong. Gautam can clarify. But certainly something that we've been working for a long time. And when we published the first paper in Nature in 2004, there was a fair amount of concern or skepticism as well whether such network models would be useful. But I think time has shown that they have their place in dynamic modeling. They are not by any means the only way to model it, as Gautam said, but certainly interesting and a novel way to model this and apply to many interesting contexts. And this is the model class I'll focus on today. Of course, building such a model is a messy and a complicated task. And because first of all, where do you get network? My argument is there is no network that is just measurable and you can use it in the model. You construct this network, and you construct it by using a lot of different data sources. How do you analyze the dynamics on these networks? Again, it becomes a very hard computational problem. How do you design interventions? Becomes a problem as well. And finally, how do you forecast? Great, I think slides only up. I'm on slide 16, 15, yeah, somewhere there.
Yes. Okay.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. I think we should be from here. So how do you forecast the dynamics? Again, these are really hard questions. In my remaining part of the talk, I try and give you a way that we have gone about doing this. Next slide. Yeah, next, 17. Yeah. So what I will do during the talk, try and illustrate three areas where role of AI in epidemic science is illustrated quite well. We just finished writing an article on this. One is notion of role of machine learning with predicting co-evolving systems. There's a lot of discussion early on about predictions. Turns out prediction systems are co-evolving because of behaviors and policy changes become non-trivial question to sort out, and then often lead to self-defeating and self-fulfilling prophecies as well, because essentially predictions are now endogenous system. So we need to develop AI methods that try and take into this fundamental aspect, very different from, say, physical system predicting the position of the moon some years later. Second is the issue of building realistic, multi-skilled and multi-network model for decision making. I think being able to represent behaviors and interactions at scale is a non-trivial AI problem and a challenge. And finally, issues that relate to optimal, fair, ethics, explainable, and optimal decision making. Questions related to micro versus macro behavior decisions. Questions related to fair allocations of vaccines. Questions related to social impact of one intervention versus other. One might have impact on a certain population that is much more harsh than other. All of this has to be taken into account as we go along, right? Good. So I have broken down the work of how we do this into three simple parts. Of course, each part is a large taking, something the team has been working on for a long time. But I think this shares the basic idea. The first step is to build a digital twin of a city or a country. Gautam described this. Our papers have a lot of detail. Been doing this now for a long time. We've also given a number of tutorials, but the basic idea is anything that is available for a city or a region of interest, including census data, including built infrastructure data, including data from cell phones, anonymized, of course, when available, including data from business location, commercial interactions, and you basically put all of that data together to build a digital of a city. So we built this early on, back in 2001, 2002 work. We have since refined it quite a bit. New data sets are available that make it relatively easier to do this now, but still a challenge in low middle income countries. But I'm happy to tell you that we have now a very detailed model of the entire US. And about a month from now, we will describe a cursor model, not as detailed as US, but a cursor model for the globe. I would still say that the cursor model is much more detailed than many other models that are available right. They do take into account the local geography quite well. So can you go back to the next? Yeah, thanks. The second step accounts for modeling on top of this network. So the first step is to build a network. Second step is to understand diffusion processes on network, diffusion of diseases, but diffusion of behaviors, diffusion of other inventions, application of them. And the final step is to do what we call epidemiology workflows to study the outcomes and help policymakers understand what's happening and provide them some science-based assessment of the decisions they might want. Next slide. So to give you an example of a piece of work that we recently completed, it will appear in IPDPS. Parantapa really had a big role to play in this. So he studied questions related to vaccine allocation in the US, and we did build a model that covers all of US, 300 million nodes and about 15 billion edges. It was hard to even use a supercomputer that we had here, which is close to 2,000 cores, but we used that. But something was done by Parantapa and colleagues, which to build what I call a hybrid cloud, where we got access, a really amazing access to the Pittsburgh Computing Center, which is close to 20,000 cores every evening for us to use, and nobody else on that machine, and later on got it in slice. But effectively, we were able to orchestrate our work between the machines, where much of the initial testing ideas and calibration was done on our cluster, which has got 2,000 cores. But the final computation of that simulation analytics was then done on the big supercomputer, because we not have as much during the day on that machine. It's a really very interesting computational challenge, apart from modeling itself, and the results are quite interesting. The IPDPS paper will appear in print. There's another paper for anonymity reasons and its mission. I can't talk much about it, but we are happy to send it to you, folks. Next slide. So what sort of workflows can we hope to achieve, right? And this is one example of what we ended up doing during the 4 months last year to support decision making, where what we would do is start, can you go back? Yeah. To try and run between 5,000 to 18,000 regional national simulations on networks of this size. And you do this essentially where you set up the basic structure on a particular day 0, and then finish all the runs in about day 3, 4. You have results and you're back to the questions after the meeting with decision makers 0. So this cycle, which is roughly 1 week long, continued for 3 to 4 months last year, as we were supporting our government here during the phases that were really very challenging in the US. Next. So this tells you how it was roughly done. And this is an example of computing the medical costs of the pandemic. This got published in scientific reports. Take a look at it. So the basic idea was that you do the calibration work, setting the parameters on a local cluster, which is marked in dotted lines. Do all the work in terms of final simulations and running on the remote cluster, and then pull the results back in an aggregate form and compute issues related to the economic impact and analysis. So this required a typical factor design, which had about 9,000 simulation instances, used about 3 terabytes of data, and produced 2.5 billion entries that were aggregated back and sent to the cluster to do the final analysis. So hopefully this gives you some sense for how the HPC comes into play, because I think putting this as an operational is as important as building these models, because as Gamet said, people cannot wait for the final best answer. We need to get this out time frame that we've been providing. Next slide. Next slide. This was just telling you how the medical intervention cost came about. We're running little low, so let me get to the next slide, please, Megha. So let me tell you this models were used. We started working on this in middle December, when we first got some sense that there's a new pathogen that might be of interest. We would call it a variant of interest now, or a pathogen of interest. But it became very clear to all of us by end of January this needs to be tracked much more carefully. And by March, we were very active in the work. And so from then on, we constituted a team of about 80 people, I told you. Team continues to work on this full time. And I've supported different agencies and questions for this entire half-year period. Questions related to understanding, understanding when the disease come to the US, how it would spread in the US, would the lockdowns be helpful? Should lockdowns be lifted? When should be lifted? What would be the role of vaccine? And finally, the role of variants and concerns that are hitting us now. And we soon starting work with vaccine allocation. There's a piece of work going with our colleagues at IISc actually in Karnataka for vaccine allocation that has just been made archive that I encourage you all to look at. It's a nice model they've built. Very interesting set of results in the Indian context. So we've supported the DoD, NSF, HS, CDC, but we also support our local, state Commonwealth of Virginia and our universities as well as the local universities. Next slide. So what you will see here is the kind of results that our state puts out every week. We are similar for DoD, harder to show because some of the sites are not open. If you go to the state's website, you will see a lot of info on COVID, and the modeling is all basically driven by this that our group has built out. So you will see different kinds of information that is provided. One is situation assessment. Every week we tell them where the state of the disease is in the state, also neighboring states and in the country, and sometimes internationally. We give them an understanding of the literature, which is really important, and we are not the people working on this. And then we tell them model projections and narrative summaries. Model projections imply how you might want to tell them what might happen under different scenarios and circumstances. This is different than prediction. In fact, after a lot of convincing, CDC now has a group called the Scenario Modeling Hub. We are a part of it. And the first results of the modeling hub were published in MMWR. This is a very important document that comes out of CC, which took models from 5 to 7 different groups and essentially put them together. As I said, they are not predictions, but they are counterfactuals. They say, if a set of interventions are applied, if vaccine doses were taken, if something else would happen, where do you think the disease would go? This kind of model projections are done every for our state and for much of the nation by our team, and become a very interesting question itself. One AI challenge I want to throw at you all, because you folks are experts in it, is in the early part we are very interested in taking data and making it computationally readable, or essentially right? We take data from all sorts of places. We all complain data is not in the right form. Work on it and make it computationally useful. The other side is rather interesting that I never sort of appreciate as much. But when the data is produced by machines, we need to actually create summaries that look like newspaper articles, reports. So here you actually take again data that machine produces and build out a human readable narrative summary. So it goes the other way. In this phase, you're actually narrative summaries from newspapers and others to feed systems. In the reverse, actually creating summaries back. And this is an open question for people to think about. Next slide. How much do I have, Megha? Deloy, Megha, how much time do I have?
You still have around
half an hour. Oh, good. Very good.
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
3 minutes. Yes.
20 minutes. Okay, I'll plan for 20 minutes. I just want to make sure. So we have built a number of different dashboards. I want to highlight some of them. This is amazing work that the team has done. Let's go from to bottom in a clockwise direction. The COVID surveillance dashboard was built around the same time the dashboard came around. It's still active. I would say JHU has very nicely done as well. We do very similar things on the dashboard. Had very similar problems. Continues to be used by a lot of people in the world. You can take a look at it. Much of the information that JHU had. We all had different data sources in time. All the codes are converging to same class of data sources. So largely a surveillance dashboard. Very little modeling is done. There is some in terms of estimating the confirmed, real cases in the population, filling data for some that is not available, smoothing things out, but largely a size of integration. And this is published. You can take a look at it. The second dashboard is actually driven models we build. We basically have built models that tell a state and now the national level system, which tells you the potential demand that the hospital systems are going to experience in terms of beds, in terms of ventilators, and so on and so forth, based on the current state, but also projections for the next few weeks. And this is done at what's called the hospital region. Virginia has about 6 or 7 hospital regions to give you a sense. So similarly, a state of this size would have the same number. So across the US, you would have anywhere close to 100 to 300 hospital regions. And we have this forecast. You can go to the website. It gets updated every week. Things look good. We never have crossed our numbers in Virginia. We're very lucky to not have to work with it. But Texas, California did see a surge and essentially going over the capacity of hospital systems. I think this is such a system is useful to be made in India as well. We also started on the left bottom a social distancing survey app with Stanford Michael Bernstein led. We had good progress, but we have stalled on other data about from folks in Italy and other places that I think has done a good job. We might research. It's an interesting thing to do because we want to collect all different interventions that were in place when they came in, how intense they were, when they were lifted. Finally, a dashboard that we did with our colleagues at Stanford, Yuri Leskovic, and their friends. It's based on the paper that they publish in Nature on trying to understand the impact of mobility on the system. So this is a forward-looking dashboard. You take the data that this is using SafeGraph, and this was done for the aid, but it can be expanded to other states as well. But you study what will happen if you say shut down or bring the attractions at say malls to 50% and hospitals down or cinema theaters down, because very detailed data set with deep points of interest, and you can actually study retail, wholesale, and other places, and how their levels of closure would change the outcome of disease in the next few weeks. So this is quite interesting database. This one is available in the open for various that we can talk about later. Next slide, please. So in the remaining time, I'm going to talk about 2 concrete examples. That's fine. Keep that. I'm going to talk about 2 concrete examples: forecasting and vaccine prioritization. Very different kinds. Models that were used were somewhat different, but hopefully will give you a sense for what happens when we try to support policy making in real time. So let's with forecasting. A range of models forecasting developed for COVID now over the months. We have been working on influenza forecasting since 2010, when IR asked us to work on it for South America, and CDC started a forecasting hub for influenza in 2011. with multiple challenges that they put out. So we have been doing forecasting for infectious disease. We also supported weather to do forecasting for influenza. And as Gautam said, we usually keep forecast to 2 weeks, and we make it fairly hazy 4 weeks, and then certainly don't want to do anything beyond 4 weeks. It takes at least the forecast people use on. We can talk about general trends after that. And multiple methods and models have been developed: statistical models, deep learning models, causal models. We're also now participating in the US-led ForecastHub that CDC has funded, and Nick has done an amazing job at UMass to run this. You can take a look at the forecasting hub there. New forecasting hub. I'm in communication with our IC team, Gautam, just to let you know, and we will start a forecasting hub for Indian context as well. We have basically built out our models, and we need others on this call to join us once this is done, because this is really community level effort. We want to build the infrastructure, we want to populate with our models, but others should populate as well. Slide. So challenges, Gautam mentioned this before, a lot of noisy data, reporting bias, a lot of backfill happens. This is an interesting thing where, even now casting it correctly important, because people change the real numbers 2 to 3 weeks because the numbers don't come on time. There's a lot of dispersion, non-stationarity in the time series, and a lot of heterogeneity and spatiotemporal variability. These time series are not in, so makes for a challenging forecasting question. Next slide. So to Nando's point, we submitted this paper with 11 Winspoor and co-authors Ravi, Dan, Dick, and Anil on understanding the inherent complexity of forecasting and viewing it from a computational science standpoint. So it is a formal question. This is the only slide with any real formal statements in it, and tries to tell you how hard forecasting is. So to understand the inherent hardness of forecasting, we said, let's say we were given the network completely, and we are told where the disease starts, one node, and we're told what that node is. We also know the transfer probability on edge, and we also assume incubation period to be 1. Not that what happens in reality. It's the simplest model one can hope to build, right? And we want to understand how hard would it to cast for a model like this. So 3 questions. First, maybe is new infections. What is the probability that at vertical time the number of infections exceeds a particular threshold? Another question is the probability that by a certain time all nodes in a given subset or let's say all the school children in a particular community, or computing the probability and number of infections at peak. What would be the value at peak and when peak appear? It turns out each of these problems is very, very, very hard computationally, right? And we've all studied computational interactability. And not only hard, usually it's hard to approximate as well. And what is most surprising probably is that hardness sets up not in the long time scale, even very short time, like 2 or 3 time steps after the simulation starts. You can't really say much about it. So the point I'm simply making is that anybody who claims they have the best forecast gets accurate is either exploiting the system in a good way, very, very, very well, or it's plain he or she's plain wrong, because I don't think so. You can get provable results using models like this to forecasting. And this point inherent uncertainties. This is actually a much stronger form of uncertainty for NAND than deviation from initial conditions. And I can talk a little bit about it as well in our papers. Slide. So, that doesn't mean we should not forecast, as Gautam said. And we have continued to forecast. A group has built what we call the multi-scale, multi-method forecasting tool. So it has multiple models. First, we think that's important. And then we use an assembler to pull models together. So this shows you different classes of models. There are statisticals like autoregressive models, spatial autoregressive models, ARIMA models, SCIR styles, Kalman filters, LST, which is a neural network for ensembling. And then we also have a model that actually uses a detailed causal model as well. And this paper is going to appear in KDD, and it's on the archive. You can take a look at it. Another version is also on archive on use of neural network. You can take a look at it. Next slide. So again, just like the previous cycle, forecasts are out every week because that's important. There's no value forecasting something months later. And what the data science challenge that goes with it is really interesting from a computational standpoint. You consume all the input data from various states that comes in on a particular day. Sunday, we are ready to run the models. We run the models Sunday, read probably some of them in time, produce the ensembles, and get results back early in the week back to the CDC site, and then they test for validity of it, and then they post it on an ensemble themselves. So that's how it works. Next slide. So this slide is supposed to tell you that. So first of all, we have done this at a scale that's not done by most of the groups. We do forecasting for every county, and we forecast every week, and we can forecast the details that policymaker interest: number of deaths, number of infections, number of hospitalizations from model. What this shows is which methods dominate part of the country at what time. And the simple message from here is, depending on the state of the epidemic, different models dominate in our ensemble in space and time. And that's all you need to know from this color map. You need to see that the colors are not static as we go along. That's why our paper was titled "All Models Are Useful." We find that all models have a role, to sort of reinforce what Gautam had said. Their role comes in because when the system is fairly steady, then autoregressive models do act quite well. But certain changes in the system, like we saw in India in February, those models fail quite spectacularly because they are largely projections of what we have seen thus far. The causal do much better. Next slide. So in comparison models with other groups, it does actually very well compared to other groups. The model, so we did this comparison with the work that CDC is combining. So it compares reasonably well with the ensemble. I think the model from Colombia and Los Alamos do well. Colombia model CU is actually quite good in my opinion. But our model ranks consistently in the top 5. There's a very detailed these models are evaluated. You can go to the COVID forecast site and get a detailed explanation of it. I'll just say that the models do well. Again, different phases. If you do one forecast, some models do better than others. Similarly, if you had one region, some models do better than others. If you look at a detail versus continuous forecast, one model does better than the other, and you expect that to happen because the way the models were structured. Next slide. So let's talk about vaccine. Switch gears. So you can go to slide 35. So the question that I'm going to talk about is, how do you allocate vaccines using network properties? And this paper is again on archive. You can take a look. It's mission. And there is of course standard age-based, occupation-based prioritization. Very good work done. Mark Lipschitz had a paper in Science along with other folks. We decided to study the question whether you can give vaccinations to individuals who have high degrees in networks, basically social buttons, if you want to call them, and would that help? Now there's this is an interesting question to study. There's a folklore, of course, degree-based heuristics for allocating vaccines all work well. We have studied this for a long time. Many papers have studied, but there are technical challenges. One is that mathematical results based on highly structured networks that talk about it really use very simple social networks to prove this result. These networks we study are nothing like the simple set random graphs people use. Secondly, and more interestingly, this hypothesis has never been studied in time-varying social contact networks, where the network is really evolving due to adaptive human behavior and the policies, as well as temporal ability of vaccines. Much of the work early on would study questions vaccines were given in one upfront, but that's not what is happening. And you're getting a quota vaccine every week, and you can adapt. So it's the Markov decision process. The challenges, right? How do you estimate people's degree? How do you find people of high degree? Where issues of fair come in? And I'll discuss all of that in the next few slides. So next slide, please. So what we do here is to use a agent-based model and focus on our state, Virginia. We have built the contact network with great care. We have implemented the background interventions that are in place, and use our simulation for EpiHyper to try and understand how vaccine prioritization should work and compare with age-based and random as a base case vaccination policy. We think that while base systems were probably not feasible maybe 15-20 years back, given what has happened during COVID, this is something that we should consider very seriously, and that digital contact tracing apps could provide at least one part of the solution. But there are others to estimate people's degree that we can talk about later. Next slide. So what are the key findings here? The first finding is that you get significant reductions in infections, hospitalizations, and deaths by using a strategy that is based on degree. In our state, you saw to 16% decrease in infections, 8 to 13% decrease in hospitalization, or 6 to 8% decrease in deaths in just 2 months, and these numbers would grow much more. When summed up over all of US, it's very significant numbers. Second, the strategy significantly outperform age-based allocation schemes, which I think is quite important. Third, we think that strategies are actually more important when NPIs are relaxed, and they should be really considered because of this real concern that new variants seem to be coming and going at a rate that is hard to keep. So the only way we know how to hopefully come down on production of variants is to reduce the overall level of prevalence. So degree-based methods might actually help out a lot. Finally, resource challenged country. India is certainly facing a challenge right now, but other countries have the same challenge. Just don't have enough vaccine, and we're not likely to like it for a long time. So it is worth considering whether this particular heuristic can be applied in at least some measure. And I'll tell you variations of it. We have been talking to other agencies internationally to discuss the feasibility of it. The next slide. So let me tell you how we go about doing it. We can do the next slide 39. And we'll finish this soon now. So the way we do it is we build a digital twin of our state. We use a lot of data that was sent to us. The basic productive number that was calculated, understanding various cumulative confirmed cases, understanding asymptotic rate, getting information on how the vaccine schedule is working, what the NPIs in place are, including virtual learning, home isolation, social distancing, and infectivity reduction. So just setting this up was a really large that had to be put in place. Again, I want to thank the teams. It's just amazing job. Tapa, Chen, Stefan, Dustin, many others did some amazing job to get this done. Next slide. So to give you some sense of the complication, here's automata or a disease progression diagram for a single individual. It has got two strict parts. One where disease progresses with an individual when he or she is not vaccinated, and one when they are vaccinated. And you have about 15 to 16 states, forget maybe one more. And you have one such thing for all the 8 million individuals in our state. That's where the complications come in. The point here I want to point out, the automata tracks asymptomatic infections and symptomatic infection. It tries to account for the role of the vaccines. It tries to account for hospitalizations and more serious illnesses. And they all calibrated to observe that we saw in Virginia after about long number of years that we've seen this. Next slide. Next. Yeah. So I'll give you the numbers now. First, vaccinating individuals who typically exhibit high social contacts result substantially improved numbers. So in this case, compared to A-based, you get 80K fewer infections. But if you compare vaccination, the numbers, of course, are much higher. Of course, this is not used anymore. It was done early on. You get a substantial improvement over A-based in terms of mortality and infections. I've only shown mortality. Next slide. This is an important slide. What it tells you is we don't need to identify or estimate degrees exactly. Let me go through this plot very slowly because I think it's probably the most important plot in terms of understanding. So the three colors show you three different scenarios. One is as is, one is fast when vaccines are available, is fast, and one when vaccines are available at slower rate. And then what we have is we have on the y-axis you have possibilities. Old age, folks are identified with high degree, and let's understand what 100%, 80%, and 60% means. 80% means that you divide the population into two parts in our simulation. Basically say that I cannot estimate everybody's degree quite precisely. So I take the top 20% in the degree set and give them some part of the vaccines, and the remaining vaccines are actually spread uniformly among the remaining 8%. Right? Even within the top 20% of the degree, we do not assign it to the highest degree. We people randomly. So the idea is to try and simulate the fact that individuals come, you estimate their degree, you essentially just estimate them whether they are high enough or not. If high enough, you can give them the vaccine. What this tells you is if you pick just half of these people, then you still do very well. And that's the result. So for instance, if you focus on as is part, which is orange on plot, you will see substantial improvement, and the improvement gets better and better as we focus on high degree nodes much more. So estimation error goes down, you get a better result, which is not surprising. On the right side, same results are shown, but in terms of deaths show both the mean and the variance in this. So the bottom line is that by even estimating individual degrees, somewhat approximately, in fact, very approximately, you can still get a very good efficacy on the final outcome, which I think was really from an operational standpoint one of the most important results that we have obtained in the last few months, because the criticism was, can you estimate people's degree? And this says you don't have to estimate them that precisely. Next slide. The system, the strategy continues to be effective when NPIs acts as well. We can skip, but essentially you can see that when NPIs are, you actually get outcomes. This is 44, 40, go to 45. Works when you have high and low vaccine efficacy. This is important in Indian context. Have actually vaccines that are slightly lower efficacy than the Moderna and Pfizer, but it doesn't work. In fact, does better the vaccine efficacy it turns out. Better meaning compared to that particular, not better in that if you have better vaccine, you of course do better. So why do network strategies? Can we go to slide 47? So the paper contains a lot of detail about it, right? But intuitively, of course, doing what we said do, individual protects not himself or herself, but the indirect protection that you get, because the degree part allows you to protect your neighbors, many more neighbors, and they downstream protect their neighbors. In our paper, we try and articulate this by computing various interesting measures related to certain spectral properties of the network itself, which is how computation in the theoretical side is done, if you want to understand the efficacy of network-based strategies. And we come close to doing a proof theoretic part, but beyond that, you have to do the proof. They're not random networks, so you can't really get a structure to it out very easily. Next slide. And we're almost there. So this tells the network properties and how they dropped in time, which is what allowed you to this. So let's go to the next slide and then we can, I know it's late. So estimating these degrees is really the key. So there are 2 or 3 different ways to do. One is using contact tracing apps to the extent that certain countries have them very well. We can use it, but we don't have to know person's degree. You can actually do it in an anonymous manner with messages such that the person doesn't ever have to reveal their degree. The person can essentially be given a message based on local computation that the degree is high enough and that they might want to get vaccinated. You can also get additional information from individuals by asking very specific questions. So particular types of work they do, particular households that they belong to. So this questionnaire can be put in when somebody comes in, ask them a few questions, and again estimate the degrees quite well. We have done this and feel it actually works out. So let's go to the closing remarks on slide 51. We can discussions on the slide later on. So let me close by saying that AI models actually indeed can be very useful. That doesn't mean they're a panacea. There are lots of problems too. So I'd be the last to leave the impression that we've solved the problem if we just started. I think they provide really meaningful solutions. The other part I want to say is that you're agile and flexible. These models are not static. As situation changes, they provide challenges, and that requires constant adaptation of the models. I've found unusual effectiveness of working in transdisciplinary teams. Having a large team with such diverse background has been critically important for the small success we have had in supporting various agencies. We could not have done it with just a bunch of computer scientists or a bunch of mathematicians or biologists. It takes everybody to join together. Finally, social, political, and economic considerations have become increasingly important. Seen this, in my opinion, in fact, pandemic is a smaller part. If everybody just stay at home for a long period of time, we could basically stop disease, right? But that doesn't, and it doesn't happen for many different reasons. Finally, communicating the results is really challenging. One has to be very thoughtful and very deliberate. We have a certain amount of responsibility as policymakers and scientists as we talk to the and as well as others, and be very transparent about what we know and what don't know. I think this is one of the problems that we have faced, and to be very plain about it. As models have helped, we have also received a lot of flack in the press saying the models are simplest, don't work. And when we can complain about it, there's a reason for it. There are so many models right now, and people have made sometimes very strong claims with models. And I think it creates a problem in the long run. And finally, end by saying that these are, if you thought pandemic is a problem, I think we just got a warning shot from the divine powers, if they may be. I think the bigger problems are coming our way: climate change, antimicrobial resistance, and climate change is not even reversible. The problem, as bad as it is hopefully taken care of with some, but the other one is largely irreversible. So I hope we all work together as a team and hopefully solve the problem. So I'll stop there. Lots of references in the slides. Megha, you can share the PDF of the slides, maybe not the doc file PT because you might have seen it, but PDF, absolutely we can have a copy of it, some references inside. I'll stop here and take questions.
Thank you, Madhav, for the great talk and the great material. Yeah. So yeah, we'll open the questions.
A few hands up. I don't know. Megha, you're going to coordinate this.
I am just allowing. Yeah. So yeah, I think the lady from Thailand, you can ask. Yeah.
So your mic is enabled. You can ask the question now. The student from Thailand.
Anyway, then Gautam, please go on.
That was a great talk. I had a quick question about whether there's been any progress in putting behavior into these models. for example, hesitancy, rumor spreading, etc., as a further angle on why you might have reduced vaccine response from a particular area. Has any work been done on that?
Hesitancy, we're starting to work. Behavior is in place. Adaptive behavior in terms of mask wearing, sense of scare. We just have a paper that we are releasing out in Meta Archive on coupled dynamics between mask wearing and disease dynamics, which is, I think, quite interesting. We'll probably follow up with disease dynamics and vaccine hesitancy. I'm starting to get enough data to set this up well. But it's a great question. As you all know, of course, that there are two different networks at play now. There's a disease transmission network and there's information network. Some part is identical, the other part is not. So, and we don't have precise estimate, but we can try and understand it with the understanding of the estimate and then hopefully give answer around it. But absolutely correct point.
Thank you.
Megha, you may go. I think she is not enough. Yeah.
Thanks, Madhav, for this talk. My question is regarding take advantage of this pandemic to some extent, like this virus has infiltrated to every corner of the world, every corner of India, for example, into tribal regions where it was difficult to spread things. So can we learn from this model rather than stopping infection? Can we start spreading things similar to following the strategy of virus, for example, where to place our teams, where to put our super spreader educationists, and how to mobilize them so that it should reach masses, or how to distribute relief material, considering the strategy that was adopted by the virus and all these things, mobilization of the population, improving the mobility of the population.
Right. I think you asked a very good question, Megha. So tomorrow, actually, I speak at this seminar on contagion. So this I review this spreading process, and you're talking about process that are related to human behaviors. That's what Gautam also asked. And I didn't catch all the question because it was a little spotty in terms of connection. But yes, we can build it. In fact, when we worked on the Ebola challenge in Liberia, we tried to understand the roles of community workers in trying to spread the word. And really, in fact, the way Ebola started and the way Ebola stopped is important for all of us. It started because there is a fundamental level of distrust in the system. People trust, they have not changed certain cultural habits, but it changed. Community leaders got engaged, and they were really super spreaders of good information effectively. People who could convince their local communities, and that really brought a fairly rapid end to the because people change their practices. Ebola had never gotten in most of the part. Only in the very end did we get extra vaccine. But till then, largely a social intervention based closure of the disease to the extent good. So we can certainly do that. How to reach masses in India, Megha, is a very challenging question. We all cities themselves have trouble, but villages, I don't know whether we even tried it. And you shed some light, Megha, you can shed some light. I have heard from newspapers, very hard to reach villages in India. It's just normal primary health care is trivial. So how to do that, I think the law is the right to tell us whether it's done, but it should be done for sure. We can't hear you.
Now you are muted.
Oh, sorry. One question about vaccination is that what's the main objective? Shouldn't we fix the objective that reduce death? Because reduce death may not translate to reduce infection. Means it may not be a 1:1 relationship. So it's not that if you reduce infection, death will get reduced or vice versa. So means I'm just critiquing your work, that shouldn't an objective be first defined, that what should be the objective?
Marathe, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. So it looks like it was an exclusive war. If Niloy spoke, then it can't speak this. But I think, Niloy, your point is a very point. The real objective of what the role of vaccine is has to be defined by that society. One cannot use it from outside. CDC has a fairly well-defined strategy. All strategies go in front of them. People will vote and decide as a community on what should be the right thing to do. Usually, people value deaths, mortality highly, and saying that's what is done here. But again, some society might do it somewhat differently. In the degree strategy, though, we see even deaths are reduced quite a bit. A variation of that is being proposed now, which is following, and this is proposed in many of the world, including India, where they take a pair, and which we can easily model, right? To take a high degree node and one elderly in that house. So it's a house, take a high degree node in that house, maybe a person who goes to work and the grandparents, rather than giving it to both grandparents. Now, both grandparents might be a good idea from terms of, but this other person might not bring the disease back home in the first place, and in that point provide indirect immunity to the other grandpa might not get vaccinated. So we think that this pairing strategy is interesting. It's a randomized in some form. It buys off the risk and reproduces expectation. But the challenge is actually right there, and that's why people have been somewhat hesitant to take into account degree-based strategy, because it's somehow the community and the world, and it's something the world has to decide. They have that giving it to high age people was the first best thing, followed by next. But India, this is the question we need to ask. I think it's we have so vaccines right now, Niloy, that if you go to that path, we might not be all the disease for a long time, or not open our economic activity. So to see whether that strategy works, and I'm in no position to decide. And eventually, the local governments have to decide that. But I think that they should consider this very, very seriously.
Sure. So we'll take one last question.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So from the context of the pandemic and how it has been evolving in India, probably we have got a huge population, and the density is also kind of distributed differentially across the geographical areas. So what is the role of herd immunity in this whole context? I mean, I could not see any model which is taking care of the herd immunity. Is that a good concept, or is that a misnomer? That's the question.
Yeah, so Sonam, you asked a beautiful question, first of all. So thanks for even asking that question. So some of the colleagues working on this particular topic now for all the 8 months. What has happened is this whole thing has turned somewhat political, right? And so the scientifically, let me say a few. Niloy, if you can allow me for just 2 minutes, because I think it is a very, very, very important question.
Yes.
First of all, I think the concept of herd immunity needs to be looked at. It's actually, in my mind, somewhat flawed. As defined, look at the mathematical understanding. It was based on compartmental models. Herd immunity is defined simply as a point in this epidemic place where I prime t, the number of new infections, the derivative of that is 0. That also happens at the peak of this epidemic curve in the compartmental model. The reason, and that's how you calculate. So if you know R naught, that is also 1 minus 1 divided by R naught. So you look at R naught and then compute. Here are problems. First of all, my biggest assertion is this concept of R naught is a really arbitrary number to some. It's not like a physical constant, gravitational constant. You can measure R naught in many different ways and get different values. It's changing also in time. That's one. Second is reason that definition works using OD models is that if you look at what's called overflow of infections after the peak, that number is really small. Okay, so that's why people assume since you reach the peak, the amount of infections but If you use network models, we over and over see something very different. You can see a situation where the disease is actually set in say part of Mumbai, and you might actually burn off much of susceptibles from the disease standpoint in Dharavi, but much other part might actually largely untouched. Okay, in the total number, you might actually say that you have herd immunity, but I would argue you have not reached. So heterogeneity of the network actually plays a rather important role. Plus what's called this overshoot or overflow. It turns out if you use these models, the amount of infection that can happen post IMT equals 0 is really substantially larger. Right? In addition to that, actually interventions that are going on. So as you open, the R0 is actually, so you get multiple ways. So for many different reasons, I think that concept is flawed. In my personal opinion, I'll go as far as by saying we should not to the extent we want to use it. Our paper is going to hopefully try and articulate what interesting aspects should be studied in this. I think as measured and as used by everyone right now, it really creates a problem because now people say, oh, Mumbai already had 60% of the people were done, so we are done. Then people say, oh no, it was not 60%. R0 was not 0.5, it was 3. Then somebody says 4. It's a moving target. I don't think so. It's a sensible number. There's a very nice meeting at Stanford, and Lauren Myers and Mark Lipschitz attended to. Its conversation is recorded. You can take a look. I strongly believe that concept needs to be relooked at, especially in the context of networks and networks. Right model to understand it because of heterogeneity of the system.
So, by heterogeneity, do you mean the different variants that exist in the same geographical space, or
network heterogeneity? People be heterogeneous. It's the heterogeneity of the network structure. People who can get it. Just there's so much heterogeneity in the system. The old model just makes it so simple. Everybody looks the same. That's why you get this one peak and you're done. But with adaptive behavior, you actually you keep getting these waves. You're seeing third wave possibly in other countries. India might wave, who knows? But by that definition of immunity after the peak was reached the first time, we should not have it. But maybe then people argue, no, not a peak at home, but that's not the right peak. So how do you define what the peak was in fact? In the normal OD model, a unique peak, and then it goes. So the models, as used, have a fundamental issue with it, and that's why it had to be used with much more care. Didn't happen that way, and hopefully our paper will help need some clarification to it. But you already can see a discussion about it by Alex Vespiniani, Mark, and Myers. Very nice work they've done.
Thank you so much for your valuable insights.
Thank you, Madhav. Great talk. And thank you, Fernando and Gautam, for this great session. Yeah, I think, we need an entire workshop on COVID, and then various aspects can come out here. So, I think that brings us pretty much to the end. So I will hand over the mic to Wolfgang.
Thank you, Niloy. So I really liked also this last session, and you're right, Niloy, we have to organize another workshop also specifically on COVID. Anyway, it's a workshop series, and I'm really happy that this first workshop worked out so well. And obviously, I'm really happy to have worked in this great organization committee. Thank you, Niloy, for conceptualizing these workshops in such a great way. Thank you, Mega. Without you, it would not have worked. That was perfect organization. Thank you, Rashid and Sophie. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all speakers, and thank you, all participants. I think we had really good talks, very lively discussions. And I hope to see you again at our next workshop as a speaker or as a participant. Looking forward to it. So wish you a very nice, thank you. Have a nice weekend. See you everybody again.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.